Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family. Talk about adoption and foster care. I'm Dawn Davenport, your host and the director of Creating a Family. And today we're going to be talking about who are the expectant moms who are considering adoption. We will be talking with Stephanie Ryder. She is a mom who placed her daughter for adoption at birth in 1997. When she was 28 years old, her daughter was raised in an open adoption, and she also has a son born later that she is raising. We will also be talking with Chantilly Wijayasinha. She is a master's of social work. She also has her master's in public health, and she is the supervisor of the domestic adoption program at Vista Child and Family Services. She oversees a hotline that provides pregnancy options counseling to expectant mothers considering adoption, parenting, or termination, and she offers resources to support the choices made by each individual. Welcome, Stephanie and Chantilly, to Creating a Family. We are so happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello.
Well, Stephanie, I want to start with you and your story. As I mentioned in the introduction, you were 27 and you were pregnant and you made the decision to place your daughter, or you were 28, I guess. So tell me about your story. What was happening and what led you to the decision that the best option for your baby was adoption?
Well, in order to explain that, I would need to back up a little and explain that I think my family is a little bit unusual because there have been quite a lot of adoptions in my family, both family members coming into our family and then other children being placed for adoption out, going out of the family, as it
Uh-huh.
were.
Uh-huh.
So for me, when I was 27 years old and I was a commercial truck driver. I was an over the road truck driver, and I was in a really, really shaky relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it made sense at that time to consider adoption. It took a little while for the father to kind of come on board with that. I think as your pregnancy progresses and the expenses start mounting, and we were not insured, so your obstetrician wants a $10,000 payment before she'll deliver you anyway, but she wanted payment. And as these things are starting to mount up, it became much more real to him. So and the hardest part, well, there were a lot of hard parts, but explaining to him what adoption entailed was kind of the turning point for us.
Mm-hmm. And then he eventually, at what stage in your pregnancy did you make the decision?
I actually figured out that I was pregnant quite late. I was about 14 weeks along, almost to the point where a home pregnancy test gives you a false negative. So I was quite far into my pregnancy, and I started working with an adoption agency just shy of 6 months, 5.5 months or so along at
Hmm.
that point. So,
And were you in the position to choose the adoptive parents, or did the agency do that? Because this was a number of years ago.
right. Actually, that was interesting. We went and were interviewing different agencies, which is its own really surreal experience. And we stumbled across an agency that primarily did open adoptions, which none of us had had any experience of. So it was an open adoption, and I did get to choose the parents.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So now we've heard about Stephanie's specific experience. Chantilly, in your position, you see a lot of women who are trying to make this decision, a lot of expectant moms who are in the process of deciding. And while I know there is no such thing as a typical birth mom, uh, I do want to ask about who do you see predominantly? So let's start with age. What age can you make a generalization about age as to the women that you see that are considering making an adoption plan for their baby?
Yes, I would say it's important to note that anybody of reproductive age I've seen anyone and everyone in that range considering adoption and making a plan. But what I would say is that in my experience, the common age range that I've seen is early to mid 20s. And I think a part of that might be because it's after they've moved out of their parents' house, and it's the time in between of them trying to get their footing and trying to figure out their life. So they might not have all of the support that they need in order to raise a child if they do become pregnant at that time.
Hmm. Well, that raises the issue of income. What socioeconomic
Mm.
status are the majority of women that you see who are thinking about this option?
Yes, I would say the majority of expectant moms are experiencing some kind of financial strain. So of the lower socioeconomic bracket,
Hmm.
and I really, from what I've seen, I feel as though that is commonly the root of the degrees of chaos that exist in their life that are bringing them to make an adoption plan. So that's something that I often remind our adoptive families as we prepare them in this process.
Let me say that and make sure I'm understanding you, that you're saying that
Mhm.
poverty is the underlying root cause often. Is that what, did I hear you correctly?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
correct.
And all the additional factors that poverty brings into a
Hmm.
person's life. Uh-huh. Is it often the main factor or just a factor?
Uh, in my experience, it all comes back to that poverty piece,
Hmm.
and with poverty comes lack of access to certain services and certain resources. So with that, you might have some mental health issues that are never able to be addressed because they might not have health insurance, or they might not have the supports to be able to have the proper therapy or any kind of medication to help with that. And then when you don't have that, then you can often see substance use because it's a way to self-medicate those issues that you may have. So I, generally speaking, in my experience, I've been able to commonly bring it back to poverty as a root cause for
Hmm.
placement.
And the marital status, I'm assuming most women who are making this choice are not married. Is that what you see as well?
Yes, the majority of women that I've worked with do not have any kind of support from the birth father. I would say around, in my experience, again, about 20% of the time, we have a birth father involved who's willing to sign and hold her hand through the process.
Hmm. Okay, that's it. So, and of the other 80%, is it identified birth fathers or unidentified birth fathers that you see?
Unidentified. Unidentified meaning we don't know who they are, or maybe they just have a first name, or they have a first and last name, but we're not able to find them. So
Hmm.
there's no real substantial relationship
Hmm.
between the expectant mom and the birth father.
How many of the women, this is a first pregnancy, and how many is it where it is a subsequent pregnancy and they're already parenting a child?
So I think thinking of a subsequent pregnancy, there's a fork in the road for that for me. In my experience, I think more often than not, a expectant mom has given birth before. But the question of whether they're currently parenting is another layer.
Good point.
I see it split in terms of they might have had children in the past, but those children aren't living with them. They might be with family members or possibly DCFS involvement,
Hmm.
which is also often a reason for them to choose a private adoption, because they would much rather be able to choose the family and have control over the ongoing contact that they have, instead of losing their children to the state and to DCFS.
And when women have lost custody of their children, their previous children or child, to the state, what is often the cause of that? Coming back, of course, to poverty on some level, but because you've already
Yes.
said that the main, yes. But in addition to, or how, what are the manifestations of poverty that have resulted in them, if you can generalize, in them having lost
Yes.
custody?
I would say that it's often some form of abuse or neglect. And when I say abuse, it might be due to substance use during the pregnancy. And then also, even though homelessness alone isn't a reason to detain a child, homelessness is a comorbidity, and it's another factor that plays into these situations. That's what I've seen.
How common is homelessness in the women that are considering, that you see that are considering adoption?
I would say, well, I'm in LA, so the homeless situation is a state of emergency here. So I might have a disproportionate number than the rest of the country, but I would say almost half of the women that I'm working with have unstable housing in some way.
Hmm. They may not be on the street, but they may be couch surfing or in their
Yes,
car or something. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. Hmm.
Okay. And you alluded to this before of alcohol and drug use. What percentage of the women that you work with are actively using during their pregnancy?
So again, there's so women who have ongoing use during the pregnancy, I would say, in my experience, it's between 25% of the time to 50% of
Hmm.
of the time, because then we have women who may have used early in the pregnancy before they realized that they were
Hmm.
pregnant. The ongoing use really is indicative of addiction,
Hmm.
whereas if it's use during the pregnancy before they realized, that is them living their life and continuing their lives without realizing that they
Hmm.
were pregnant. So I think that's an important factor to consider. It's about whether there's ongoing use after discovering the pregnancy versus just initial use before realizing.
And the 50%, is that ongoing use, or is that women who at any point in the pregnancy early on before they realized it were using?
Yes, that's early on. So 50% of the time is initial use prior to realizing that they were pregnant.
And what percentage have addiction issues and are continuing to either alcohol or drugs throughout pregnancy?
Well, I think with considering the opioid crisis in the country and also in California, I can't speak to the rest of the states, but meth is
Hmm.
definitely on the rise here and very prevalent.
It's
So,
across the U.S. Yes,
okay, yeah. So,
methamphetamines.
yes, yes. I would say, I can't give an exact percentage, but I would say maybe 1 in 4 expectant moms that I'm
Hmm.
working with have some form of addiction. It's not usually alcohol, but I would say the most common ones that I see, it's methamphetamines or some opioid.
Hmm. And you may not have an answer to this, but how often is it a multi-abuse situation where, yes, they are continuing to use meth or opioids or whatever, but in addition, if for no other reason other than the environment they're in, they also continue to drink, so that they're a multi substance abuse.
Um, I think drinking, I see less of drinking alcohol, to be honest. But I will say also with the legalization of marijuana, that is
Hmm.
definitely seen more as medicinal. So I've seen more and more women share that they've been either taking edibles or smoking marijuana through the pregnancy because it actually helps with their nausea, or if they have anxiety or other
Hmm.
things, it assists them. So in that sense, I do see different layers. But then also there are expectant moms who are not using any other drugs, but it's only marijuana because it's
Hmm.
seen as
Hmm.
medicinal.
Hmm. Well, and I also don't think we've done a particularly good job as a society, as we've moved towards legalization, of educating people of the impact of the teratogenic impact, the impact on fetuses of marijuana. So I think there's that too, which yes, is complicating. Big news, everyone. The Jockey Bean Family Foundation has provided us with scholarships for free access to 5 of our most popular courses. You can find these courses and the coupon code at the website bit.ly/ JBF support. That is bit.ly, bit.ly/ all cap JBF, then cap S for support. So JBFS, that's all capitalized, then UPPORT. Again, the coupon code to get you these courses free is going to be on that page as well. And the courses are Raising Resilient Kids with Dr. Ken Ginsberg, Raising a Child with ADHD to a Successful and Healthy Adulthood with Dr. Ned Hallowell, Unexpected Stresses for Newly Adoptive Parents, Practical Solutions to Typical Food Issues with Dr. Katja Rao, and Parenting Children Who Have Experienced Trauma with Karen Buckwalter. Make sure you go to the bit.ly/JBF support to get information on these courses. All right, so Chantilly, what are some of the reasons that you hear from women or couples when they are deciding, as to the reasons why they are deciding that they want to place their baby? You've mentioned that poverty is the root and the underlying, and then you've also mentioned that fear that the children will be taken by the whatever the welfare system is, wanting to keep the system out, whether it's called DSS, DFFs, or whatever. So in addition to those, what are some of the reasons that you hear from women that they're considering this option?
The response that I will most commonly hear is that they just want a better life for their child. And it's a life that they're not able to give them. So whether it's because they don't have stable housing, or they don't have a partner, or they don't want the life that they had growing up for the child, they want something different. It ranges, but it's always thinking about what's in the child's best interest and wanting better for the child than what they're able to give.
So although poverty is a root, it sometimes is deeper. Oftentimes it's deeper than that, as far as what the mom is looking for, or the reasons why she is considering adoption, I should say.
Yes. I would say it's really amazing and humbling to work with these women who are able to really assess what they are able to give their child and simply wanting more, and recognizing someone else out there can give this child more. And because I love this child so much, I'm going to experience maybe the greatest loss in my life to be able to provide that for a child.
So at what stage in the pregnancy do you see women coming in? And then at what stage do they ultimately make the decision on whether to match with an adoptive family?
So I've worked with women at all stages of their pregnancy, but I typically see most of them when they're in their third trimester. And I think that's because in the third trimester, you really start to feel the baby, and you might be showing at that point. So you really do have to confront the pregnancy and realize, okay, some decisions need to be made regarding whether I'm going to place or parent. So I would say in the third trimester, that's typically when they come to me and when they'll start the process to select a family.
And you mentioned that you run the hotline and provide the counseling. So what type of counseling is typically provided for moms to help them decide if adoption is the best plan for them? So what are some of the things that you counsel them on?
Right. So in terms of their options, we'll go through each option and assess and just also imagine what life would be like for them, depending on which route they took. So if they decided to parent, what would that look like? If they decided to place, what would their life look like? And specifically, we look at what supports they would have in terms of if they decided to parent, do they have anybody in their family that could help them with the child and maybe help with childcare, or even friends who can assist with that, versus with adoption, will your family or friends agree with your plan? Will you be able to be open about this and have support unconditionally with that? So that's the main piece of looking at what their supports are, and also looking at what their overall goals are in life. So if they're planning to return back to work or return to school, will having a child really impact them to a degree where they won't be able to achieve their goals? And what is their goal? Is their ultimate goal to raise a family? And maybe it's a little bit earlier than they anticipated, but we can provide resources to help with parenting. Or is it much too early and they want to focus on what their life trajectory is, and focus on their upcoming goals, and a child might not be, might interfere with that.
And do you provide them contacts for resources if they choose to parent?
Yes, we do.
hmm And depending on when in the pregnancy, you also will be counseling them on their options, or can refer them to if termination is what they want to consider, depending on when in the pregnancy they come to you.
Yes, we do that as well.
Okay.
hmm
Um, how do you educate expectant moms on what adoption looks like now? Often, and Stephanie referred to this, but and we'll be coming back to Stephanie in a minute here to continue her story. But the open adoption is so much more common now. Transracial adoption is more common now. So, how do you educate expectant moms on what adoption looks like now, and how
hmm
many moms come in with pre-existing ideas about openness, or transracial, either one for that matter?
hmm So I would say that since openness has been part of the practice, at least here at Vista Del Mar, since the early 80s, but I think still within our society and our community, the idea of openness is still, there's a learning curve happening. But I think any expectant mom who is doing any kind of research around adoption will see that openness is common practice now. So oftentimes when an expectant mom reaches out to me, they'll just say, I want an open adoption. But what I've noticed is that they might not know what the details of that is.
Yeah.
They just know, I
What does
want
that mean?
openness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So, and that's something that I also, once we talk about that too in our options counseling of, okay, what does an open adoption look like? And we distinguish, it's not co-parenting, but it is a situation where you can have a degree of involvement in this child's life, and this child will always know you, and you'll always know this child. And what's comfortable for you is what we can put forth. And so that can include an annual visit. It can include pictures and updates every so often. It can be FaceTimes, it can be phone calls. And we really tease out what would feel good for this expectant mom, and what their expectations can be after placing. And of course, we only will look at families who are open and willing to have that degree of ongoing contact, because we don't want an expectant mom to have to compromise or negotiate what they want in terms of ongoing contact.
Well, that raises the issue of how are you educating adoptive parents on open adoption, because they too have, if they've done any research, they've seen the words open adoption, but they too are usually lacking in any nuance of what it actually means.
Right. So we really take pride in the education that we provide our prospective adoptive parents here at Vista, and we have a full day course where a huge chunk of it is on openness and adoption, and we really outline what the benefits are for everybody in the triad for some degree of openness, how it benefits the child in terms of their identity formation and just having those physical touchstones and understanding where they came from, and also understanding why their birth parents may have placed. The benefits for an adoptive parent to have more confidence in being able to parent, because for much of the child's life, they are the bridge to their birth parents, and they are the connection, and the relationship between adoptive parents and birth parents really serve as the foundation of the relationship between the child and their birth parent. So I think that really builds confidence and just an understanding for adoptive parents. And then, of course, the grief and the loss that ongoing contact helps for the birth parents, and how it really helps them validate the choice to place, and it's a very affirming process for birth parents. So we go over all of the benefits of openness. And then also, sorry, I can go on and on about this, but also considering social media, and between social media and 23andMe and all of this genetic testing, if anybody wants to find someone else in this day and age, it's going to happen. So why not get ahead of that as an adoptive parent, and you be the one to be able to control that, and not even control, but to provide that for your child, instead of kind of keeping that away from them and them having to find other routes that don't include you, because that doesn't reinforce you as the parent. When you're providing this information and connecting them to their birth parents, this is reinforcing you as the parent. So that's another piece that I make sure to share.
In just a bit, we're going to talk with Stephanie about her open adoption with her daughter and her daughter's adoptive parents. But before we get there, Stephanie, can you talk some with us about the emotions you experienced during your pregnancy? You mentioned that you found out fairly late into the pregnancy. You were not in a stable relationship. So, what was some of the emotions that you went through in making the decision that adoption was what ultimately was in the best interest for your daughter?
A lot of it for me, it was a lot like, if you ever had like an ice shower or getting splashed with very cold water, that's
I
a
hate that feeling. That's
that's
terrible.
that was a lot of it. It was a wake up. I'm not I'm not a child anymore, and there were consequences. So for me, it was a real wake up call when I sit down and I was thinking to myself, how am I going to do this? I'm not going to be able to drive a truck. You can't raise a child in a Peterbilt. That means I'm looking at pretty much raising a child by myself. And am I adult enough to do this? And a lot of self reflection, a lot of questioning. It was a very lonely, kind of a sad time for me. It's hard to explain. The father was involved, and in fact, we did stay together for a few years after she was born and after we placed her. But it seemed like I was the adult in the room, at least until I started working with a counselor. And that was tremendously affirming to have somebody who would just listen while I'm poor. I mean, just vomited practically all these fears and worries. And
Mhm.
how do I do this? How do I make this work? And what is in this child's best interest? Because it just seemed to me that getting pregnant at 27 and saying, oh, good, I'm going to have a baby, she'll make me grow up, is entirely the wrong way about. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to grow up first and then have the child.
Mhm.
So it was sad. It was lonely, a lot of self-questioning, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of it was growing up, basically. I think I grew up
Yeah.
10 years in 4 months.
Yeah.
As
It's
odd
a
as
tough.
that sounds, it's yeah.
No, it sounds really difficult. You were involved with well, you and your baby's father were involved in the selection process. What was important to you when choosing parents for your daughter?
I partially, the father and I both come from very strong working class backgrounds. There are the occasional doctor in there, and there might be a CPA somewhere in the family tree, but mostly, we're ranchers and farmers. I mean, I was a truck driver. So I was looking for very solidly middle class people, somebody that I could relate to,
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't want to choose a rocket scientist and have this child grow up to be more interested in working with her hands. You know, you want a child that I wanted to find a family that she would fit in with, where the
Mm-hmm.
background would be somewhat similar. And there's, yeah, it was interesting. I had to come up with a wish list of what I was looking for. And this counselor did a really good job. I got the perfect family. They pretty much everything I wanted, actually.
Okay, so you worked with a counselor
Mhm.
similar to Chantilly, I assume,
Oh, yeah.
to help come up with a checklist, a wish list of what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Chantilly, I'm assuming that you're in this position with other expectant moms. So what are the different approaches? What are some of the things that expectant moms think are important when choosing? We just heard from Stephanie what she was looking for, but what are some of the other things that you have heard?
Oh, it ranges. I think it really just depends on what the expectant mother's life experience is. I've had, especially when we think about transracial adoption, I've had um, some some moms say, I want a family that actually has that at least has one family member that has the same racial background as the child, because especially in this climate and historically, I want to make sure that the family knows how to raise a child with this background and knows how to equip them. So I've seen that. I've also seen sometimes religion is a factor. So wanting to make sure that the certain values that they have will be passed on to the child. I've also had someone say, I want them to be athletic because both the birth father and I are athletic, and we know that this child is predisposed to this, and we want them to be able to have that outlook, or those opportunities. So it really, it ranges, but I think ultimately something that I hear most commonly is I just want to make sure that there's a family who will love this child and be able to provide for this child for the lifespan. So.
What do you see as far as acceptance of single moms? Because oftentimes the women themselves are
Mhm.
single and and might be considering that one of the things they could give their child, that an adoptive family could give their child, which they
Right.
couldn't, is a two-parent household. So what is the acceptance of single moms who are applying to adopt?
Yeah, I think for individuals that are coming into the process, I think it can be presented to them that, oh, they might not be as chosen as much, or it might be less likely, but I think that there's there is this sense of connection and understanding between an expectant mom and a single prospective adoptive mother. Because, like we mentioned earlier, more often than not, expectant mothers on this journey are single themselves, and they can see a lot of themselves in the prospective adoptive mother that they chose.
Mhm.
And then I also have worked with many women who said, I was raised by a single mom, and I know what it takes to be a single mother, and that means that they have the strength and a support system to be able to provide everything for this child. So
Mhm.
I've seen that, and then also thinking about single fathers as well. I've had expectant moms choose single fathers for similar reasons. Of I was raised by a single dad, and I I love my dad, and I want my child to have some semblance of what my experience was growing up. So.
In the last 10 years, we have seen a significant increase in acceptance for LGBTQ parents. I'm assuming,
Mhm.
given your location, that you see that as well, that families, expectant moms who may not have considered parents in the past who were LGBTQ would now have no problem at all. Is that what you're
Yes,
seeing as well?
yes, absolutely. Um,
Hmm.
I think, especially just with greater education around just the different types of families that exist, it comes greater acceptance and willingness to place with
Hmm.
with a range of families. as well. And I've had birth parents or expectant moms who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and that's a driving factor of why they want to choose a same-sex couple or someone who identifies as LGBTQ.
And Stephanie, when I'm assuming that you were presented written information on a number of families to help you in your choosing.
Mhm.
Did you also meet with families before you made the selection?
Actually, that was an option. I could have, but there's something very surreal. You're looking at all of these bios, these written bios, and you don't want to get their hopes up. So
Hmm.
I opted to wait until I was pretty sure I found the family,
Hmm.
and then I met them.
And then you met them.
Yes.
Okay. And at what stage of pregnancy, how many months along were you when you actually met them and
Um,
selected them?
I actually met them about, I'd say a week, maybe 10 days after I first started working with the social worker. By the time I met with the social worker, I was pretty well committed that I had made up my mind that this is the road we're going to go down.
Hmm.
So there wasn't a lot of shilly-shallying on my part. I just
Hmm.
knew
Hmm.
that was her best shot at a good life.
And so you were actually matched then from almost mid-pregnancy on then,
Right,
or close.
right.
Yes, that's a longer match than is usual, but then you also had gone in with a fairly firm idea.
Right, right. For me, one of the things that was important is I wanted to find a family that would be willing to come with me to the prenatal appointments, and a family that would be comfortable making some decisions because, this, in my mind, this was their child. So I wanted them to come with me to these appointments and to make decisions, in terms of everything from vaccinations to who's going to be the pediatrician, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. So it was really
Hmm.
important to me that we begin to work together for the benefit of this child.
Hmm. And also so that you could get to know them
Oh,
better
yeah,
to really,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I can see that would matter. I want to take a moment to remind you that this show is brought to you by the generous support of our partners. And these are agencies that believe in our mission of providing unbiased education and support, both pre and post adoption, fostering, and kinship care. And they believe in it not only just in word, but also they're willing to put their money behind it. And that allows us to provide this show for you. One such partner is Adoptions from the Heart. They were founded by an adoptee, and they are currently celebrating over 35 years of bringing families together through adoption. They're a full-service domestic infant adoption agency specializing in open adoption. Adoptive parents and birth parents share their stories on the AFTH TV, which airs Tuesday morning. You can follow Adoptions from the Heart on Facebook and YouTube to watch every episode. All right, Chantilly, one of the things that we hear from other agencies is that they see sometimes, and I don't know the percentage, but they see sometimes where adoptive parents struggle with, I guess the polite way to say it is the lack of control they have over this pregnancy, and the desire to want to, if I were pregnant, this is what I would be doing, and this is what I want the expectant mom of my child, and air quotes being placed around the word my at that point. I had an agency say that 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 they are seeing adoptive parents who basically are thinking of the expectant mom as a surrogate, who they're paying to carry their
Mm.
child, so to speak. Is this something that
Mhm.
you see?
Well, I do see families who might be inclined to treat expectant mothers this way, but again, that's why we spend a lot of time educating them around this and being able to draw the bridge between adoptive parents and expectant moms in terms of having empathy for them and understanding that this isn't your child until after the child is born. Like, legally, this isn't your child until after the child is born and until she signs the documents that will relinquish those rights to you.
Mm-hmm.
And we really do talk about, especially in the home study process for adoptive parents who do struggle with issues around control, to talk about, okay, what are the coping skills that you have? What's in your toolbox for you to bring out? Because there are going to be things that are just completely out of your control in terms of the decisions that an expectant mom makes. And kind of another parallel is the things that might drive you nuts about an expectant mother might also be the reasons why she's placing to begin with. So the decision making.
That's a really good point.
Right. And so to understand that and understand her as a human and a person who is just simply trying to make the best out of a tough situation. And the best that you can do is support her so that she can best support the child that you hope to adopt until she delivers.
Mm-hmm. And what type of counseling is provided? And this varies substantially, I should add, between agencies and agencies and adoption attorneys and things, and different other options for adoption professionals. But counseling after the adoption seems like it is such an important piece of a service that adoptive parents should be expecting and should ask for.
Right. So we actually have a whole department dedicated to this. It's post-adoption services. So there is a social worker who can provide ongoing support and counseling to families who would want that or need that. And we also host ongoing educational seminars. Every month, we host a different seminar on some adoption-related topic. So one month it was on transracial adoption. Another month last month it was on the 7 core issues of adoption. And then we've had a birth mom come and share their story. So that I think is an important piece, to have this ongoing education. And also I think community is such a huge piece in just family building in general, because being able to have other families who have gone through a similar journey and can relate to you can be your greatest resource in so many ways. So hosting, and before coronavirus, we would have an annual picnic. So families pre and post adoption could come and just mingle and play with other kids and be able to develop that support system as well. So
yeah. Okay. Now back to you, Stephanie. You matched with a prospective adoptive family towards the middle of your pregnancy, and they were involved in your pregnancy. Some people feel that experience could be coercive, that it makes it harder for a mom to decide to parent after she has formed a relationship with a birth family, and the fear that if she decides to parent, she knows whose heart she is breaking. Did you ever feel that you had the full authority, full right to parent? And do you feel like it was coercive in any way that you had formed a relationship with your daughters, with the prospective adoptive parents before delivery?
Actually, that was something that the counselor, had mentioned, is, for both of us, to, don't necessarily put your heart on your sleeve because it's devastating. I don't think that I ever really felt like I had to go through with this. Or maybe if I did, it was a sense of, I walked down this road. I've made such a hash of my life that it was pretty much adoption or nothing. I mean, I didn't want her to be raised by a single mother, and she would have been raised by a single mother in poverty, no less. And it wasn't, I don't feel like her parents ever coerced me, or that there was some coercion there. I think if there was, it was my own poor choices, to put that way.
Am I understanding you correctly to say you feel like your choices put you in a position that this was the best option, the only option you really foresaw?
That is correct, yes.
So what was your hospital experience like, Stephanie?
Oh man, here we go. Let me tell you a story. swear to you, truthful here. I gave birth in Houston, Texas, and as a society, we're not very kind to women who choose not to parent the children they bring into the world. We're just not. When I was about a month before I actually gave birth, you have to go down and pre register at the hospital. And I took my daughter's mother, her name is Kathy. So Kathy and I went down to pre register. And the registration lady said something to the effect of, well, I just don't know what kind of mother would do this.
Oh,
That was strike one. And I remember, and it was great. I fell in love with Kathy for reals and forever because she looked her right in the eye and she says, the kind of mother who thinks of her child.
Mm.
If I could cross stitch that and put that on a wall, I would, because that is really what it's about. It's about the kind of mother who thinks about the welfare of her child. But the nurses didn't quite know what to make of this. They didn't know what to think. They To begin with, they didn't. I had a cesarean section. She was a transverse breech and blah 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 blah. I had a cesarean, so they didn't really want to put me on the maternity ward because they were afraid that the sound of the babies and the new mothers would upset me, which was silly. But I understand that. And they didn't know whether or not, for example, I wanted Kathy to spend a little bit of time while we were still in the hospital with her daughter because she's going to be taking this child home, and if she has any questions, I wanted her to be able to ask the nurses. And Kathy would ask the question, and the nurses would look at me, and they would speak to me, and I'm like, ma'am, it's not my question. You don't understand. We're going to hit the front door, and I'm going to go north, and they're going to go south. And why are you? There was
mhm,
this sense of not knowing what to do or what to make of it. It
mhm,
felt like you were blazing this trail when adoption is not that uncommon. It is
mhm,
uncommon, but it's not that uncommon.
mhm.
Where,
Hopefully, we've made some progress with hospital
oh
experiences.
man,
Although I will say that that other hospitals will do just the opposite. Other hospital personnel, and that is that they address everything towards the adoptive parents and
right,
treat at this point the parent
right.
uh, as if they are not even there. So that's another two sides of the same coin, but both equally bad, I suppose.
It's a little surreal, I will say that. To just
Yeah. And so the emotions for when you left the hospital and they went south and you went north. Uh, Tell us some about the emotions that you were experiencing.
I don't know. This is actually, it's kind of funny. It is a funny story. So Kathy wanted our daughter was born on a Friday evening, and on Sunday morning, I was cleared to be discharged. I could go home. And Kathy and Mike, her parents, decided that they would give her birth father and I some time with her at the hospital, and that they would just stay at home and give us all a little bit of time to think it over. And so a Sunday morning, they're telling me, well, you could go home, you could be discharged. And I'm in this panic because I can't find Kathy and I can't find Mike. And I actually came completely unglued. I mean, postpartum, the emotional, hormonal roller coaster, I thought they changed their minds and didn't want the baby. So I'm having a complete meltdown.
Oh no.
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, in hindsight, it's absolutely, of course they didn't change their mind. But so, and it was very important to Mike and Kathy that they be given a child. That was one of their big must-haves. They didn't want to feel like they were taking a child. They wanted to be given a child. So hospital policy at that time was that the woman who brought the child into the world had to be discharged with the child. So we got wheeled down out to the main entrance, and I got out of the wheelchair and I handed my daughter over to them. And I think that's when it was really real. Um,
Hmm.
it just, because up until then, it was a long process of waiting to say goodbye. And all of a sudden, it's time. And
Hmm.
it's, I can still cry just thinking about it. That was, I think, the hardest thing I have ever had to do, to know
Mhm.
that's the right answer and to be confronted with the
Mhm.
reality of it. It was a roller coaster that day, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, I bet. And what were the emotions for the first couple of months, the first year? And what was helpful for you to get through that time?
A lot of it, this particular agency offers lifetime counseling. So to this day, I could pick up the phone and there would be somebody who would talk to me. So
Excellent.
that helped enormously. And I got to stay because I didn't really have a home. I mean, my home was a Peterbilt. I was staying in a house with other women who were going to place their children. And so I stayed there for about 6 weeks, and there was quite a bit of sort of aftercare, if you will, because it was an open adoption. I did get to see my daughter when she was about 10 days old, when the newness, everybody had sort of settled into our new reality at that point.
Hmm.
And I remember being absolutely amazed that I brought this little girl into the world and that I made this family.
Hmm.
To
Hmm.
step back and to see this family and to realize I did this. Wow, I
Hmm.
got to take part in a miracle.
Hmm. And describe your open adoption throughout your daughter's life.
It started out initially until she was about into about the first grade. It was mostly letters. They were able to get a hold of me if they had questions. One of the things that I didn't think to mention when I filled out the health paperwork was that quite a lot of members of my family have allergies to nickel and to metal, nickel being the big one. So when Kathy was confronted with a rash that she didn't, Holly went on to get this rash, and Kathy couldn't quite figure out, do I panic? What do I do about this? And it helped her a lot to be able to kind of reach out to me a little bit because it was a very non-judgmental relationship for me to be able to tell her, she's probably allergic to metal, or it could be the perfumes and the dyes and soap. So obviously, she knew what to do, but it was, I think, helpful for her to have
Hmm.
additional information and to have somebody who was very much on her side, you know, uh, telling her, "You
Hmm.
got this. It's okay. It's breathe. It'll be okay."
So she would reach out to you via letter. This is let's see, this is
Phone
be
calls.
what
This would have been about
yeah.
about the year 2000 or so.
Okay.
So, we could text a little bit, but, she would just kind of reach out. She's got a bit of a rash. And I said, oh, yeah, speaking of which.
Yeah. Okay. And then did the openness change at any point thereafter? You were originally just phone calls between you and Kathy and
Correct.
uh, letters and things. Did it change to a different form of openness
Yeah.
uh, as as Holly got older?
Yeah. Once she became a teenager and was a little bit more, wanting to take some more control with, there were some pretty, there were boundaries, but she was pretty much in the driver's seat at that point.
Hmm.
She could get a hold of me, but the running joke in our little triad was always, she would threaten her, tell Kathy, I'm going to go live with my real mother. And then I, being the real mother, would say, but you're living with your real mother. It's not going to get better here. That's your real mother. So as it like any other relationship, it just evolves over time.
Hmm.
She was allowed to be in the driver's seat to some extent, and it's
Hmm.
interesting. She's the reason I'm a grandmother. She's a grown up now, obviously, and yeah, and yet Kathy and I still have a relationship. It's
Hmm.
interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask, what is your relationship with both your daughter and her mom now?
Every year for Mother's Day, I have from the beginning, I've always sent Kathy a bouquet, not necessarily roses, but I'll send her a flower, a bouquet, and wish her a happy Mother's Day and thank her for, in some ways, choosing adoption was a really selfish thing on my part because it gave me the opportunity to grow up. somebody was willing to step in and save me in a sense. I could grow up and I didn't have to take anybody with me. So I've always sent her, Mother's Day. I always thank her for resetting, giving me an opportunity to grow up, a
Mhm.
do-over, as it were. And I've always thanked her for that. Holly and I get along pretty well. I don't hear from her, every couple of times a year. Seems to be what she's good with at this point. It's I think the message that she'd been getting all her life, that Kathy is her real mother, and yes, I brought you into this world. Yes, we share some DNA, but that's your mother. I'm here and I love you very much. But that I think that message has really sunk in. She does reach out to me, and we do have, a good relationship. I would say
Mhm.
it's more, the relationship is really now more with Kathy and I, which is odd, really odd.
Hmm.
Not what I would have expected.
Huh. Interesting. All right. Chantilly, something that Stephanie said that struck me and is so important is the availability of counseling post placement for, at this point, there would be a birth mom. The term would be the birth mom. Can you talk a little about what you see and why that is important?
Yes. I think it's important because if anyone who's experienced grief or loss understands that it's not something you just get over. It's
Mhm.
something that you learn to live with or you learn to cope with. So it is a lifelong experience. And so with that understanding, when you place a child, that is a great loss. And having the support, the ongoing support and services available to you as a birth mom is vital to your ongoing health, and also just validation and just support in terms of your process and your choice. So we do, like I said, my pregnancy options hotline, it also kind of serves as just counseling for birth parents who have gone through the process too. And in California, we also have a great foundation that we partner with that provides ongoing services for birth parents, birth mothers in particular. And they host annual, actually, I think it's twice a year, they host retreats for birth parents. So it's a really great time for birth moms to be able to meet other birth moms, because I think Stephanie had mentioned earlier that it can really feel like an isolating experience. And being
Absolutely.
able to connect with others who share this with
Mhm.
you, and you can relate to in that way, can really be an essential part of one's healing. And we recognize that, and really encourage the women that we work with to, we actually will refer them to this organization that provides this ongoing support system
Is
for
it
them.
open to birth parents outside of California?
Not all 50 states. I think there are certain states that they're open to. If the birth parent signed California relinquishments, it is available to them.
Okay.
But right now, they're limited to California,
Okay. But there
as
are
far as I know.
other birth parent support groups. There are some in-person groups that exist. Your adoption agency should be able to connect the mom who has placed a child to these groups. There are also Facebook groups. There are groups available nationwide that birth parents as well as adoptive parents should encourage their birth parents, their child's birth parent, but also birth parents on their own can connect. Stephanie, I'm going to give you the last word. If you could tell adoptive parents one thing about the experience of being pregnant and trying to decide on whether to place your baby for adoption, what would that be?
It would actually be two things, I think. First off, the pain and the sense of loss that infertile couples feel is what your birth mother is going to be feeling mostly. That there's that, and then the importance of just honest communication, of keeping, whatever promises you've made, to keep them.
Yes.
You don't want to feel betrayed. You don't want to feel used. You don't want to feel like somebody has just snatched your child and tossed you in the bushes. It's a
Mhm.
very, it's a lonely time. It is literally waiting to say goodbye. So it can be a very lonely time.
Mhm.
I guess some sensitivity to, she's not necessarily, at that time I really couldn't imagine what she was feeling, and looking back on it, I'm amazed that she, it's amazing that it worked out as well as it did, because neither of us, there's all these hopes that you're taking to the table. And if you can kind of put those aside a little and relate to that person.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe if nothing else, treat this woman or this couple as people who are probably going through one of the hardest times of their life.
Oh yes, we talk a lot about the birth mother, and to some extent, I think we forget about the birth father. And unfortunately, only about, she said, only about 20% of those couples actually are a couple. So that might
Mhm.
be why. But he's there too.
Mhm. Yeah, good point. Yeah,
It was
good
a
point.
very hard thing for him. Very hard.
Mhm. Yes, and I think you're right, we don't tend to give as much attention to, partly because they're not as often as involved, but yes,
True.
I agree with you totally. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie Ryder and Chantilly Wijayasinha, for being with us today to talk about understanding who the women are who are making the decision to place children for adoption. I truly appreciate it. Hey, I have a favor to ask. Please pop over to iTunes or Stitcher or whatever podcast app you are using and give us a rating. Ratings are how people find us, it is how we get increased listenership. That is really important to us and our mission. And we would really appreciate it. It doesn't take very long, and the appreciation is huge. Thank you. Let me remind everyone that the views expressed in this show are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the position of Creating a Family, our partners, or our underwriters. Also, keep in mind that the information given in this interview is general advice. To understand how it applies to your specific situation, you need to work with your adoption or foster care professional. I will see you all next week.